Hey everybody, it's Lady Led, and I just wanted to do a video to kind of maybe save you some of the trouble I went through when I first started gardening. If only I had known, right? The reasons why my plants weren't growing. Now, if you planted something and it's been a while and you notice like there is zero progress, no new leaves, it's not dead, but it's just kind of sitting there. Why the leaves were yellow, why they were falling off, why this, why that, right? So today we're going to talk about 5 different reasons why your veggies are not growing. It could be because of spacing. So let me show what I'm talking about. If you watch when I broadcast these seeds, I literally just tossed them in here. I didn't try to give them an inch apart, nothing. I just sprinkled them in there and I was okay with that. And for the most part, so is this lettuce. As I start harvesting it and thinning it out, it'll grow more and more and it'll be fine. The lettuce can actually handle not having a whole lot of space. I'm going to give you one more example, okay? So if you look, I gave my plants almost a whole foot between each other, and they are huge, right? Huge. Okay, for the most part, they're big because they are getting the space that they need. But let me show you the ones that are tighter together and how big they've gotten. So these were the volunteers, right? So I didn't take any time to separate them. And as you can see, if you can see past the weeds, their stalks are literally nowhere near. Nowhere near, look at that. And they've been growing the same amount of time. So spacing is really important if you want your veggies to grow, if you want them to be bigger. Obviously they may not grow to what we're used to having in the grocery store, but you can really optimize them by paying attention to the spacing. Now, every plant is different, so I would say do some research for it. I always start with what's on the back of the seed packet. Give them that spacing. And then, of course, it's okay to experiment from time to time, but for the most part, spacing is one of the main reasons why stuff isn't growing. And I've gotten people sending me pictures of, they've got a pot and it's literally filled with seedlings that aren't doing anything, and they're wondering what's the problem. Well, they don't have enough room and all of their roots are competing and taking up all the nutrients that are in the bucket. So you've got to give them more space. Another reason why things aren't growing is because of lighting. Either they're not getting enough direct sunlight or they're getting too much. If you've got plants that are leggy, oh my goodness. The leggy plants can be really depressing, right? Because you're so excited when you start those seeds. You're so excited when you see them sprout. And then a week later, they're falling over and looking super unhappy. That's because they're not getting enough light and they're literally spending all their energy reaching for more light. Sometimes you can recover them from that, depending on if they can tolerate being buried a little bit deeper in the soil, and sometimes not. But if you know this ahead of time, that's something you can make sure you avoid. I've got some plants that are getting leggy in there. Let me show you. See what I mean? These are some turnips that I planted a few weeks ago, and when you see long stems like this, even though once I plant them, these should be okay, but this is a sign that they're too far away from this light. I should have either propped this up a little bit closer to my light or I should have brought my light down, but I didn't do that. So that's why they're looking leggy. Another reason why plants aren't growing is water. Either they're getting not enough water or they're getting too much water. And again, sometimes that's hard to know, right? So I have some stevia seedlings that sprouted, right? And I had them in here with my lettuce. So they were getting watered every other day when I watered my lettuce, which my lettuce was like really happy about getting the water. Well, the stevia was not. As you can see, I even had one that finally just died. I guess it was just too much water. These are finally recovering once I took them out of the bin that I had the lettuce in. And this one over here is finally, like, once I found, you know, the watering frequency that it liked, now it's doing much better. But that was an issue, and that was something I had to figure out. And I only figured it out by noticing that the plant wasn't growing. And then in contrast, this plant wasn't getting enough water and it was all flopped over. So even though I come in here to water things, I can't water everything. So everything is kind of on a different watering schedule. And then the next reason why your veggies aren't growing, or why they may have hit a plateau, is because, like me, I've done this several times. You may have forgotten to feed them, or you might not even realize that they needed fertilizer. Well, they do. Once they've used up the nutrients that are in the soil around them, they need more. So you need to give them something. Give them some 5-11, some composted chicken manure, or some composted horse manure, or mushrooms. What's the other one? Composted cow manure. They need something. And then the last reason, I'm super guilty of this reason. I'm about to show you a plant that I have literally totally neglected this plant. It's either neglect that the last one is, and I kind of place pests and different issues along with this as well. Because if you're regularly tending to your plants, for the most part, you can recognize when there's some pests and you can do some interventions or whatever. But when you're not even looking at the plants, they do stuff like this. This is probably my most neglected bin of plants. Somebody asked me before, had I planted some beets? Yes, I had. But I have totally neglected these beets, and they totally look a hot mess. Well, this is like not just neglect though. For one, I was supposed to come, and here's another reason why you need to thin your plants. I was supposed to be, as they were sprouting, paying attention to that. I was supposed to be thinning them out. My plan was supposed to like kind of eventually space them out regularly in this container, but I never got around to doing that. Totally neglected them. And that's why, even though they've got some bases, they don't look like beets. These are a total hot mess. Now this is charred. It's not doing the worst, even though it is still neglected. This is some more charred. But y'all, some pests have been at these. And you can tell that when you look at holes. And who knows what's going on back there. And all this dead stuff. You can see I haven't been in here harvesting leaves or nothing. They just been in here dying. And that's what happens when you neglect your plants. So just a recap of reasons why things aren't growing in your garden. Things that you can totally prevent. The first thing I said was spacing. Try to avoid overcrowding. Make sure you give your plants enough space. The second thing I said was making sure your plants are getting enough light so that they're not going leggy, Or on the other end of the spectrum, not getting too much light, like my orchids, they can't handle direct light. So it's also about knowing the plant's need. The third thing I said was making sure you know how much water the plant needs. Is it too much water or not enough water? And each plant has its own needs. Fourth thing was, don't forget to fertilize your plants, especially those that you want to produce fruit for you. And 5, don't neglect your plants and let the pests get them, because guess what? I promise you, they're gonna beat you to the harvest. They will every time. So hopefully if you avoid these 5 things, you will have a wonderful growing season. And I hope that everything produces abundantly for you. So much stuff, you have to give stuff away. You gotta can it, you gotta dry it, you gotta whatever else to it, put it in those vacuum bags, whatever you gotta do, because that's how much stuff you're gonna have. So it's Lady Led.